I'd like to talk about the Ayurvedic clock. One of the real principles of good health is to get your digestion working well and to get your sleep working well. Pitta, which is kind of the fire element, and Vata, which is the air and space, and Kapha, which is the earth and wet. What's most predominant in us? We all have a constitution that's made up of either one of those or more likely a combination of two of them. So for instance, my constitution is Pitta Kapha, which means that I have quite a bit of fire and I also have quite a bit of earth grounding. So the fire is action oriented. All of the doshas have a positive aspect and an aspect that causes more trouble for us. So the positive aspect of Pitta is you have energy, you have passion. People who have a lot of Pitta tend to be very productive. And then the Kapha aspect in my constitution is grounding and solid. But the negative aspect of both of those, the Pitta, if you have too much Pitta, you can be irritable, you can be angry, there can be kind of too much fire. You could, on a physical level with your digestion, it could be ulcers and, acid reflux, that kind of thing. Now, Kapha, which is solid and grounding and stable, has the negative aspects of too much of that. Someone who has a lot of Kapha in their system could be quite sluggish. Their metabolism could work quite slowly. It would be hard to get anything done because everybody would just be wanting to kind of curl up and cocoon. So everybody has these combinations. Vata gets more predominant as we get older. So it has to do with the air element. And it has to do with, in a positive aspect, it has to do with flexibility, creativity, ideas. Everything's kind of fluid and changeable. Just like the wind, the breeze kind of moves around. That's the Vata quality, is airy. It's not very stable. The negative aspect would include being kind of scattered, not finishing projects, just kind of never able to settle anywhere. So when we look at this in terms of sleep, if you have too much airy quality but not enough stability, then you're going to have trouble sleeping. If you have too much kapha, which is the grounding, stable element, but that's not balanced with anything that would help you to get up and get moving, then you might have trouble getting up in the morning, you might have trouble doing things. So all of these three elements of our constitution have positive and negative, and they all can be in balance or out of balance. So we have our predominant qualities that we're born with and that we have through life, and then we also have longer term trends, and we also have the effect of what's going on around us. Summertime is Pitta, and so Pitta is the fire element, so it kind of makes sense that it's hotter in the summer. If you already have quite a bit of Pitta in your system, like maybe if your constitution is predominantly Pitta, then you might be more irritable in the summer. You might get overheated more often. And then you might want to do some cooling practices. If you take a look at the fall months, kind of fall into early winter, that's the Vata time. And with Vata, it's the winds of fall. They're cool, kind of cold. They're dry leaves that are rattling around. Those are the kind of elements that affect us more in the fall and through the winter. It's that dryness, everybody gets dry skin. Things are just a little bit more scattered. It's harder to be grounded. And one of the ways that we would work with too much Vata, you would work with stabilizing warm, like nourishing soups and stews and hot drinks. You wouldn't be trying to eat cold salads and cold drinks, that kind of thing. The whole system of Ayurveda and the doshas helps us to work with what's going on kind of longer term, the constitution that we have coming in, and also what's going on in the different periods. Then the spring, kind of early spring into early summer, is the kapha time. It's heavy, wet, damp. The snow's melting if you're up in the northern climates. There's a lot of people get colds in the spring. So it's that kind of mucousy, heavy time of year. We also have an Ayurvedic clock that goes through our daily life and one that goes through our years. So the kapha time is more predominant in children. Pitta is more predominant kind of from young adulthood to middle age, and then once we get into being a bit older, then the vata starts to become more predominant. I'll post a chart too so people can see what the Ayurvedic clock looks like. So we can work with that on a overall yearly basis. We can, during the summer, we can work at things that would help to cool us down. Cooler drinks are more beneficial in the summer. In the winter, they're not so much. So a lot of ways that we can work with that. And the way that I wanted to bring this in around sleep is on the daily Ayurvedic clock. So from 6 a.m. until 10 a.m. is kapha, predominant time. From 10 until 2 is predominantly pitta. And from 2 until 6 p.m. is predominantly vata. And then the whole cycle repeats. So 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. is kapha, and then pitta, and then vata, and then we start again with the 6 a.m. kapha. So what that has to do with sleep is the recommendation is to get up at 6 a.m. or before 6 a.m. so that you're not too far into the kapha period. If we sleep past 6, then once kapha starts to move in and gets more established, it's a lot harder to get out of bed. We feel more sluggish. We might have a harder time waking up. We might feel kind of stunned or not very awake when we first get out of bed. So it's not like we can't overcome that. With our schedules, the way we have work schedules and everything else in North America especially, oftentimes we just have a schedule that we need to stick to. But ideally, if we can work within these schedules, it's easier to get up and to be awake and alert before 6 a.m. So during that 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. period, if we're already up, we don't have quite the effects of kapha as if we're still in bed and trying to get up. And then from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., it's the pitta time. And pitta being the fire element, that actually coincides well with the time of day. The sun is the strongest between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. It's also when Ayurveda recommends that we eat our largest meal because the digestive fire is strongest at that time of the day. And then from 2 until 6, we're getting into vata, which is a more airy, not so stable time. And then we start to, have a lighter meal. We get into the kapha time again. And how it relates to sleep is if you can get yourself to bed before 10 o'clock, then you're still in kapha time, and it will be much easier to go to sleep. If you wait until after 10, we move into pitta, and then we start to get our second wind. So everyone's experienced that, I'm sure, where you're really tired, it's 7 or 8 o'clock, and I'll often think, oh my God, I can't even imagine staying up until 9 or 10 when I can go to bed. And then by 9 or 10, I'm starting to feel, okay, this would be a good time to go to bed. And then if I don't, by 11, I'm up working or doing something, and I've got all kinds of energy again. So the recommendation is really to get to bed before 10 and to get up before 6. Another reason why that's really important for digestion is that between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., that is when the pitta predominance can help us to digest the food that we ate during the day and also to digest our experiences. So that's an ideal time to be sleeping, and when we don't sleep during that time, our body doesn't have that ideal condition to digest. So we have, incomplete digestion. The digestion just isn't as robust if we don't get to bed and let our bodies do that task during that time. From 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., the energy is starting to get lighter. The vata, the air energy is moving in, and that is when we're more likely to wake up. And especially as we get older, lots of people will say, as I got older, I found that I couldn't sleep. I would wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's because that we're not as deeply asleep at that time of the night, we're starting to get into that less stable, more moving energy. And that's an ideal energy to get up, ideal time to get up between then. So those are some ways that we would work with the Ayurvedic clock. And then in terms of actually aligning ourselves with the clock, it's never really a great idea to make dramatic changes with sleep. It's usually a good idea to make any kind of change more gradually. My meditation teacher used to say, change something by 10% until you're completely used to that, and change it by another 10%, whether it's sleep or food or any kind of habit pattern we're working with. So if you're noticing that you're having trouble going to bed and getting to sleep, I've had a goal for a long time of regulating my sleep by getting to bed by 10 and getting up by 6. And depending on what's going on in my life, I'm more or less able to do that. I notice that I always function better when I do. And then sometimes something will happen. I'll get triggered or stirred up by something, and then I'll get off kilter, and then I'll have to kind of bring my way back to it. So it's one of those things that we can't force ourselves to go to sleep. So we can't, it's not very useful to just like go lie in bed, turn everything off at 1 minute to 10, get into bed and lay there and trying to force ourselves to sleep. It's more that we can set conducive environments. One of the things that I do, not every day for sure, but a lot of the time, is I try and turn my electronics off around 9 p.m. and have some quiet time, maybe do a little practice, do a little reading, something like that. I generally don't talk on the phone after 9 p.m. because engaging with people on the phone or in conversation is more activating, and then I have a harder time falling to sleep. And I don't do that every day. Like I have band practice on Tuesdays, so I don't get home until about 10. So obviously I'm not going to just wind right down and go into bed, so that tends to be a later night for me. So we need to work with this within our own lives, our own personal lives, and not be too rigid about it. And the more that we can do it, the better that we're going to feel, the better our digestion will be, and the better our lives will tend to work. So try it out if you like. I've got some information that I can post about it so you can see the different times of day, the different times of year. And I'll post also some links about some of the suggestions about how to work with it. If you have too much pitta, how you would pacify that. If you have too much kapha, how you'd pacify that. Or the same with vata. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. It can feel a little bit overwhelming in terms of, I should do those 517 things. But really it's just one of those things where we pick one or two things, start to work with it. And then once that gets to be our routine, then we could, choose something else and work with. So let's do the Agni Sara practice. The way this fits in with all of the clock is that we would do it before we have meals. Would be a helpful time to do it, especially before that midday meal if we have that as our largest meal that takes the most digestion. We can also work with it in terms of trying to have our right nostril open when we're working with when we're going to eat, to have our right nostril open before we eat. And the way that the right to left balance works with sleep is that we want to have the right nostril open for a few minutes when we first go to bed to activate the digestive system. Then we want to turn over onto our right side and let the left nostril open, and that will help us to get to sleep. In the morning, we could lay on our left side and focus on the flow of the energy in the right side of the body, in the right nostril, and that will help us to feel more alert and to wake up. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work with this. So let's work with the Agni Sara. You can do it standing up like we did yesterday. And if you aren't familiar with that, that's the day 12 on YouTube. And I think it's called Healing Digestion Agni Sara Standing, something like that. So if you're in the standing pose, you would be standing with your knees bent, the feet Legs about a little bit over a foot, a little bit more than hip width apart. You're going to be resting your hands above your knees, on your thighs above your knees. Lots of length through the back. You could tuck your chin in a little bit. That helps to keep the energy inside. And then apply the root lock. So with the root lock, when you're in that position, you just bring your attention to the perineum, to the base of the pelvic floor. And a little bit above that is where the energetic lock is. So we don't want to have a lot of tension or clenching in that area. Just apply a little bit of light awareness. And then as you're exhaling, begin that squeeze with the lower part of the belly. And then the couple inches above that, couple inches above that, staying below the navel center. And then inhale, let that release happen. As we're working with it for a while, we get more control over the different parts of the muscle. So we can do it like a rolling pin, coming up from just above the pubic bone up to the navel center. So whenever you're tired, or if it's feeling like too much, always just stop the practice, sit back down, and do some diaphragmatic breathing. There are contraindications for this practice: hernia, menstruation, high blood pressure. I've got them listed in the other yesterday's practice. So if you have any of those conditions, then don't be working with this as strongly, or maybe not at all. So exhale, this squeeze, lower belly up through the mid belly, right below the navel center, and then release. Release from the top to the middle to the bottom. Check your whole body, that your body is relaxed, that your forehead isn't doing the work, your toes are soft, shoulders, the neck. Keeping your mind focused. Noticing this intense squeeze, the whole of the digestive system gets a squeeze. And then as you release, all the new fluid, the blood, the lymphatic fluid, all of that rushes back into the area. One of the reasons that it's so good for our digestive system, we get this squeeze and massage, and then the release with every breath. It's always a good idea to be kind and work within our own capacity. If you're feeling like this is enough, then sit down and relax. Breathe diaphragmatically, let your stomach muscles get a rest. And then after your next inhalation, finish the practice and stand up. And then sit back down and relax your whole body. Pay attention to your body. And in particular, pay attention to the navel center, the lower belly that you were just working with so strongly. Visualize that healthy, robust digestive fire at the navel center. Invigorating this capacity to digest our food, to digest our experiences. And feeling that invigoration through the whole body from head to toes. Oftentimes this practice generates warmth, or maybe kind of a glow. So notice your experience and then bring your attention to the flow of the breath in the nostrils. Just with your awareness, allow the breath to flow with your awareness from the eyebrow center to the base of the nose, noticing how the air flows over the membranes in the nostrils. Noticing which nostril has more airflow, which is active. The nostril that has less airflow, that's passive. Notice the digestive fire at the navel center, keeping an eye on that as well. That whole body awareness of what it feels like now in our bodies. We have the physical body. The muscles of the stomach might be a little bit tired. We have the prana or energy, the breath. We have the thought stream, that level of the mind that generates thought. And this level of the mind that watches the body, the breath, the lower level of the mind. And touching in as well to our being, our consciousness, the space in which all this is arising. And for a moment, rest in that awareness. And remaining in touch with that, open your eyes. Notice you can still be paying attention to the body, the breath, the thoughts. The fact that these are being observed and the space in which it's all coming up to be observed. And try to touch back into that throughout the day. Just take brief moments throughout the day to touch back into the body and your whole experience.